We're going to call the meeting for Akron City Council to order at this time. We're going to have our clerk read the roll.
Baylor. Council. Aye. Thank you. Connor. Freeman. Aye. Fusco. Aye. Holland. Aye. Kamer. Aye. Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick. Aye. Malik.
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
Neal.
Here.
Amobian. Somerville.
Aye.
We have all members present except for Connor and Amobian.
At this time, for those who voluntarily wish to do so, would you please stand as we are led in prayer by Pastor Rodeman, who is the pastor of Grace Church, the Akron campus. Immediately following our prayer, I'm going to ask if Councilwoman Mosley will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together and work for the good of the community. Lord, I ask that you would give each man and woman gathered here tonight in the council, give them wisdom, give discernment, get a sense of your presence, and Lord, ultimately give them wisdom on how to move forward in governing the affairs of the community. So Lord, we ask for your presence here today and ask that you would lead in each and every heart and mind. It's in your name that we pray, Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The minutes from our previously held meeting have been provided. Are there any additions or corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Baylor. Aye. Freeman. Aye. Fusco. Aye. Holland.
Aye.
Kamer. Aye. Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
Neal.
Abstain.
Somerville.
Aye. Yes, Councilman Neal?
Yeah, I would like to stand because I do abstain on these minutes. Since one of my colleagues' questions, I've answered why I've abstained before. And it's because I do not feel our minutes properly document what takes place in this meeting. You can compare our minutes to the school board minutes. You can follow what happens with business takes place in their minutes. Now that our meetings are live streamed and on YouTube, I think we need to be more clear on what we are voting on as approval, because if we're challenged, what is going to take precedent? Is it going to be the YouTube recording of our minutes and what's said on this floor, or is it going to be with what's in those written documents? I also feel that it would be good for things to be time-stamped. I noticed on the 27th, our recesses were time-stamped, but when certain people spoke, it wasn't time-stamped. So if someone wants to follow our minutes and follow what's going on, you have to sit through however long that meeting is, however long that committee meeting is. So and it goes into, when we talk about institutional practice, it's the way we do things. And if it's still conducive to how we should be doing business today. So just for clarification, I've stated this before, that is why I do not approve the minutes, because I do not feel they properly document the business that's transacted in this horseshoe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Neal. Before you, you have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, roll call.
Baylor. Aye. Freeman. Aye. Fusco. Aye. Holland.
Abstain.
Kamer. Aye. Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
Consent agenda passes 11-0 with one abstention.
Okay. We do have one item up for public hearing this evening. Our clerk will read in item number 1.
Notice is hereby given that the following public hearing will be held by the Council of the City of Akron on Monday, March 13th, 2023, during the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. Ordinance authorizing a conditional use to establish an adult daycare at 222 Jewett Street.
Mr. Antonucci?
Yes, thank you, Madam President, members of council. Betty Brazil is requesting permission to establish an adult daycare home at this location. The proposed daycare, known as Faith and Mercy Homes, would occupy 2 floors of the 3-story dwelling. The daycare would be staffed from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. The petitioner has stated that there will always be at least 2 staff members on site during operation hours. The adult daycare center will offer individually centered programs designed to enhance daily living skills for up to 5 adults. Although the daycare will specialize in patients with Alzheimer's, it can accommodate people with other needs. Besides providing daily breakfast and lunch, clients will be taken on weekly community-based outings. No changes to the exterior of the building nor signage are proposed. The petitioner stated that transportation will be provided for their clients, whom are either referred from Medicaid or families with private insurance. A 2-car garage with a lengthy driveway would provide ample off-street parking. Since transportation will be provided for the clients and all activities will occur during daytime hours, the proposed use should not be intrusive to abutting properties. However, the property is in a dense neighborhood near the terminus of Jewett Street. As such, the number of clients on site should not exceed 5. Providing quality adult daycare service is beneficial to the city. Office of Integrated Development, Planning Staff, and Planning Commission recommend approval, subject to conditions.
Okay. Thank you so much. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and open up our public hearing. Do we have anyone here in the audience who wishes to speak in favor or against item number 1, which is 222 Jewett Street? Anyone wishing to speak in favor or against? Seeing and hearing none, we will close our public hearing. Councilman Fusco, what is the committee's pleasure?
I'd like to pull the committee to refer this item. Kamer? Aye. Baylor? Aye. Mosley?
Aye.
The request of the committees to refer this. Just as a point for everyone here, spoke to a concerned citizen this afternoon that lives right next door to this property. Going to meet with her as well as the petitioner who arrived a bit late, had a wrong time, as well as Mr. Antonucci. So we're going to try to coordinate that meeting so that all the questions that were asked will be answered.
Okay.
And then we'll bring it back to council.
Okay, thank you so much. So this item will be referred. We will now move into our old business. We'll start with Planning and Economic Development. Councilman Fusco.
Time on the balance.
Time will be granted. Rules, Councilman Freeman.
File.
Item number 1 will be filed. Councilman Neal.
Yes, Madam President, is it possible to have that piece pulled out and voted on by council?
I'm sure that we could.
Yes. I mean, I received several calls and emails in regards to what took place. I just think the resolution is simple. It's about council, just submitting ourselves to a process so that we can reestablish, trust and confidence from our constituents in the business community. And from the emails that I've received, folks would just like to know if council is for or against that.
I just want to make sure procedurally we know what we have to do in order
Yeah,
to make that happen.
Sure. That's why I asked. I know we've done that before. Since the committee just wanted to kill it by not bringing it out, I've received calls. I'm sure others have received emails. Again, this resolution is just asking that we submit ourselves to the same process that we submitted the police department to. The same process. Looking at our policies, practices, and procedures to reestablish the trust of the citizens of Akron and our business community partners. If this body wants to vote it down, that's our privilege. But I think based on the emails I received and the calls I received, constituents would like to know if that's just the feelings of the committee or of council as a whole.
Madam President, my understanding from committee is that the committee did vote to file this item, and the correct procedure, I guess, would be then to make a motion for an adverse report, that the committee's report was adverse.
Okay, we did vote to file this. So at this time, I'd like to poll my committee for an adverse report. Freeman, aye. Fusco? Aye. Amobian?
Abstain.
Connor's not here. Malik?
Aye.
Committee has voted for an adverse report.
So at this time, I'll do a roll call on the adverse report. So an aye vote would be that you are voting with an adverse report.
Councilman Malik?
I just wanted to make a brief statement beforehand. I appreciate the discussion we had in committee. As I've said, I'm very disturbed by what's happened at council the last few weeks. With that being said, I don't feel comfortable, especially with the language that says that, it appears that some folks have violated their oaths of office. I, take that very seriously. And so I'm not going to be supporting this.
Councilman Neal?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to clarify the part that my council colleague is uncomfortable with. This comes directly from the Democratic oath that we take to take office. It says, whereas there has been strong appearance that council members have violated the elected oath of office that requires that they be able to honestly, impartially, and faithfully perform their duties of office. And the reason why impartially means that and correct me, my understanding of the word impartial may be wrong, but that means we treat everybody the same. One of the things that brought us to this point was the treatment of Amokai Akolo. He was not treated the same. You stated institutional racism. Do you know what institutional racism? To have a government official talking to the FOP, law enforcement, about a black man. That's why I asked my colleague if he knew about Fred Hampton, if he knew about Malcolm X, about Martin Luther King, about J. Edgar Hoover, and how they survey and follow black men. Here we have, it's just, I'd like to know who else was on that list that you committed. But that's not impartial. That's not honesty. That's why that's in there, because we took an oath to honestly and impartially conduct our duties. And if you don't know the history of this country, and if you don't know the history of law enforcement and the surveillance of young black men, then you really don't know what institutional racism is. You really don't know what structural racism is. You really don't know what systemic racism is. That's why that's in there.
Councilwoman Holland, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Madam President. As I mentioned this afternoon, the recourse for anyone who believes that either the rules administered by the Ohio Ethics Commission or by the Secretary of State's office and our local county board of elections are clear. They're not new. They are available to any citizen residing in the state of Ohio who believes that he or she has been adversely affected by a conflict of interest, by some campaign finance impropriety, what have you. What becomes, I think, all too clear is that what we have here is a disagreement among individuals, and that it is improper to use the resources of the city and to tie up city council to explore such a thing. The options are readily available. They are included in the Ohio Revised Code, and they are well known to every elected official who serves in this state. Now, if it is the case that someone in this council, including the sponsor of this resolution, believes that laws have been violated, I would say that it is only fair, and it is incumbent upon such sponsor to make it clear, and I say this from a point of personal privilege, that the entire city council is entitled to a degree of respect and decorum around this and other issues. If there is a complaint to be made, make one. That is the custom, that is the process, but I take personal umbrage at the idea that because there's a disagreement, one which I share for the record, and which I believe everyone in this room and everywhere else knows I share, that that I would be, and that other colleagues of mine in this room would be swept into that as well, is unfair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Can Councilman Fusco? Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I'm not going to list all the conversations I've had for 2 months with regards to the appointments that the council's made. Also, the other side of this is communicating. We commit to one another all the time whenever it comes to zoning, whenever it comes to discussions with constituents. Oftentimes you'll see conversations between colleagues, folks from the administration that we have discussions with. We'll say, yeah, you know something? I think I'm going to support you, Mr. Kamer, on that particular issue. I understand where you're at. This is the way legislation works, whereas you say, I'm going to support you. Where we have problems, I believe, and what has been lost at times, and we've seen here, is whenever honor has left the building, and whenever you commit to something, you say you're going to do something, and you don't do it, okay? And I know that oftentimes we try to be open-minded, we look at things, but in terms of this process, if I recall correctly, interviews were conducted in December, early January. We had like 2 months to look at this and to do a deep dive in terms of those applicants. And a lot of conversations with constituents, with all kinds of folks. So I stand by my words in terms of committing my commitments. I always have stood by my word, and I will always stick by my word. That's the way I was raised. But unless there's a compelling reason, and then I would go back and you know, talk to those individuals that I committed to. Throughout this process, this is the way legislation is made. This is conversations are had, and it's the way it works. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilwoman Amobian?
Thank you, Madam President. I am abstaining from this because there are portions that I agree with, certainly, and there are portions that I don't. So rather than say, no, I don't totally disagree with everything. Now, I read in the paper, and there's a press release on the city's website, where Linda Amobian has been irresponsible. I think the mayor has been irresponsible for not condemning these men, these 4 white men who committed to FOP about an oversight board placement to oversee the police department, and never said a word about that. But he says that I am irresponsible. But I take objection to that. But I just want to state for the record that I have been very clear that I am in full support of Omokai, Okolo, but I don't think your legislation is just referencing that particular incident. I think you were talking about a number of things that have happened down here. But I have said to you, and I will say on the floor, that you have no need for approval from this body to bring in the Ethics Commission if you want to bring them in to do an investigation or whatever it is that you have concerns about. But I stand by the fact that if I'm going to be called irresponsible by the mayor, I think he needs to use his leadership to call out the other individuals that are irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Neal?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Again, this is for us as a collective body. From my culture, when we talk about Ujima, collective work and responsibility, with that is a phrase called Ubuntu. I am because we are because I am. As a member of council, what I'm asking for this body, I would be under the same scrutiny, because we are to function as one. The emails and things that I've got in support of this legislation most recently aren't from my constituents in Ward 4. They're from Ward 8. They're from Ward 1. They're from folks who are watching that don't even live in this city, but had considered doing business here. But they have a concern for this city because they grew up here. So, again, let's make this very clear. There's nothing political behind this. I know that I can go to the ethics department by myself. The statements that are in this resolution, as I said, come from the emails from our constituents and have come from, over the past month, those who have spoken at that podium. But I think I'm not only a councilman, I'm a business owner in this city, I'm a resident, I'm vested in this city, and it concerns me that a government body wouldn't take steps. Sure, anybody can sue. And I told you earlier, I told the citizens, don't sue, because when you sue, all you're doing is suing yourself. Ask for the investigation. But I would hope that we could have taken the lead, again, doing the same thing that we asked the police department to do. Investigate look at their policies and procedures and see how they can be improved. It's no secret. Mr. Fusco, you said last week that this is broken. And the way to fix it is for us to take an honest look at our process and procedures. And we as a body should be able to do that, but we haven't. So that's why we would ask somebody else to step in. So it's very simple. The citizens could do what they want. Yes, I could do that. But the citizens have already expressed interest. If we don't do it, they will. But I would hope that this body would be willing to submit itself to the same scrutiny as we've asked our police department to undergo. Thank you, Madam.
Councilman Fusco?
Just briefly for the record, so that we're all on the record here, we all understand exactly what was said. Whenever I said it's broken, I was talking about the, excuse me, the Police Oversight Board. That is broken. The process and the designers of it, which I've made very clear that some pieces of it, we should have taken our time. They knew that council was going to need to clean up. That's been said. It's not a secret, but it's the oversight board, as is broken.
Thank you. And I think I'm going to go to Councilwoman Mobian and then Councilwoman Holland.
The only thing I want to say about that is that we had 62% of the citizens of Akron who voted for the Oversight Board, the way it was structured, and the charter amendment that was on the ballot. Now, if you're saying that the citizens are too stupid to know what they were doing, well, you should say that. But no, it is the Oversight Amendment that was passed by the citizens of Akron, and that's what we're stuck with for now. If we want to wait for us to utilize it and see if we can improve it, that's another thing. But you wait and put the citizens in place, let them operate to see how much we can get done. If there's a need for improvement or amendments, we can amend the amendment if we want to and take it back to the citizens. But 62% of the citizens, I think they were bright enough to understand what we were trying to do. Thank you.
Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam President. I think that what is most troubling about all of this to me, and I say this somewhat while holding my nose, okay, is that this seems to have gained momentum or developed an urgency by my colleague, the sponsor of this resolution, in the wake of the difficult and, yes, disappointing process of coming into compliance, substantial compliance. We're still not even in compliance with our city charter with regard to the Civilian Oversight Board, and with the repeated effort to try and reach not even consensus, but sufficient consensus, if you will, if that's a thing, to have been able to seat all 9. That was difficult. It was arduous. It brought out things about our city and about viewpoints that were disturbing, deeply so. And I think I can say that for both sides, if I might put it that way. But here's the thing that we know, because we are all part of representative government. We all are here as part of what is really the heart of democracy. And that is that we're not always going to agree. In fact, I would find it odd, and we really should all be concerned if that day comes, where every vote is unanimous, where there is no debate, where there is no even heated argument around an issue, because when that day comes, it's over. Now, I recognize that this is a hard one because the issues that we've been dealing with over the past, not just the past few weeks, but the past many months, have really been challenging. And I said it this afternoon, they've been challenging on a soul level. They have invited us as a community, as a citizenry, to look inside and really ask ourselves, what matters? Who are we? Where are we going with this? And this has been hard. I wish that what we were talking about right now was something like, I don't know, a dog leash law, okay? Because then I think the point might be a little bit easier for us all to get around, for us all to reach consensus on. But you see, democracy says that we will struggle, that there will be debate and disagreement and disappointment. So I would simply throw out that the solution, when we have bitter disagreement, and I would offer to my colleague that I understand, in my way, I understand, but that when we resort to something like the threat of serious criminal action, and that's what's offered by the Ohio Ethics Commission and by the campaign finance laws, okay? Serious business, which everybody in this room takes seriously by definition. Because if we don't, the penalties are serious, okay? But this is not a blunt instrument used to settle differences. This is democracy. If you have an issue, if you have a good faith belief that somebody is in violation of the law, take action. It's as easy as whipping out your handheld device and Googling, how do I file an Ethics Commission complaint? How do I file a campaign finance complaint? It could not be simpler, and it is your right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other comments or questions at this time? Councilman Freeman?
Just reiterate the vote that there was an adverse report.
So right now, we have a motion. Do we have a motion on the floor for an adverse report? Did we get a second? And we have a second. So all in favor of the adverse report?
Baylor? Aye. Freeman? Aye. Fusco? Aye. Holland?
Aye.
Kamer? Aye. Lombardo?
Aye.
McKittrick?
Aye.
Malik?
Aye.
Mosley?
Nay.
Neal?
Nay.
Amobian?
Abstain.
Somerville?
Aye.
The vote is 9-2 with 1 abstention.
Okay.
The resolution will be filed.
We will continue with our old business, budget and finance. Councilman Freeman.
We continue to take time on items 1 and 2, and just remind everyone that we have received all the information we need for this week's upcoming operating budget, begin tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you so much. Public service, Councilwoman Mosley.
On number 1, the committee is requesting consent agenda and continue time on number 2.
Okay, thank you so much. Item 1 will be placed on the consent agenda. We will continue to take time on item number 2. That concludes our old business. We'll now move into new legislation.
Item number 1 is offered by Freeman. Ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts for the renewal of business automobile liability insurance and primary umbrella and excess liability coverage for all City of Akron vehicles and physical damage insurance coverage, including fire division vehicles and EMS units for a period of March 20th, 2023 to March 20th, 2026, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Freeman,
Consent, please.
this item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item 1A is offered by President Somerville, Councilwoman Holland, Vice President Fusco, Councilman Malik, and Councilwoman Mosley. Resolution urging the City of Akron to allocate and/or reallocate coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund monies or other city funds for the purpose of providing Akron residents relief from the burden of excessive medical debt. urging the exploration of obtaining additional funding and/or other in-kind contributions from Akron's local community partners for the purpose of enlarging the program and making it more impactful, encouraging the city to establish a process and the necessary infrastructure needed to make the medical debt forgiveness program successful, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilman Freeman?
Committee's report is favorable, and we're asking for passage on this resolution. And I would, if I could, please, I'd like to defer to both you and to Ms. Holland on this. If we could,
Yes,
please.
and I was actually just going to open up the floor for Councilwoman Holland.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Councilman Freeman. This is a resolution urging that the mayor and the finance director and this council move toward including in our current operating budget process the budgeting of sufficient funds from either coronavirus relief funding or from the general operating fund to provide for a medical debt relief program. Before I lay out what that program is, I would ask for Emily and Mike and Max to stand up and allow me to introduce three of the teammates who have been heavily involved in this effort. These three are medical students at NeoMed. They are part of an advocacy group that is dedicated to assuring that all folks have access to health care. Thanks so much for being here. This resolution was very much brought about because of their efforts and the work that we've done together. So medical debt is something that is truly one of the serious upstream problems that we have talked about so many, many times in these council chambers. In 2022, let me get the precise number, 41% of Americans carried roughly $195 billion in medical debt. Now, what this represents is not just uninsured folks. This represents folks who have full insurance, who have employer-based insurance, who have insurance purchased in the so-called marketplace as independent contractors, as self-employed individuals, and who have been surprised by the expenses that are related with a serious illness, a serious accident, or that of a loved one. This is about the surprise that happens after that unplanned illness or injury. Now, closer to home, the estimate is that here in Summit County, there are at any given time, but this is a 2022 figure, 13% of residents are carrying this kind of significant debt as well. This resolution, if implemented fully by inclusion of a significant commitment in our operating budget, would allow for working with an existing nonprofit organization that has found a way to retire so-called bad debt. I joked earlier that there's no such thing as good debt, but we're talking about aging medical debt that is in or primed for collection. This is the most revolutionary system for taking away the burden that is the leading cause of bankruptcy that can affect not only eligibility from a credit report standpoint for housing, for a mortgage, for qualifying for an apartment, for getting a fair shake on a security deposit, but also can show up on a background check for employment, but can also, perhaps most seriously of all, can cause folks to forego medical care that they desperately need because they're afraid of increasing that debt load. So how does medical debt relief work? Anybody living in the city of Akron who is earning at or below 400% of the poverty line, and to give you an idea of what that number is, it's $111,000 for a family of four. Anybody at or below that level carrying a medical debt load at or above 5% of that annualized household income would qualify for this help. This is something like magic. This is an opportunity to hit a reset button and give people a fresh start and a new chance. But there's more, because here's the thing. Not only has the Internal Revenue Code regulatory body that covers use of ARPA, COVID-related relief funds, not only has this passed muster under those Treasury regulations, but this has actually been an idea that has been recognized through an executive, a presidential award, recognizing that this is life-changing. Not only is this a way of assuring that people get the relief they need from an oppressive, burdensome debt, but this can also give them a new lease on a stronger, healthier life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Freeman?
No, just, I still stand dumbfounded from what I heard today. So the committee's report's favorable, and with that, we ask for suspension of rules.
Okay. Councilwoman Amobian?
I'd just like to move that we do this as a mayor and council as a whole.
Thank you so much. So we have a motion on the floor. Councilman Malik?
I just wanted to make a brief statement. I particularly want to thank the students who helped put this together and everyone who was part of this, especially Councilwoman Holland. But she made a point that I want to make sure to convey to everyone, which is, as we talked about this afternoon, this resolution is one step, right? It's a declaration that this is the intention of the council to move forward with this, but it is not putting money behind it, right? And so conveniently, today is the day that we started our operating budget discussions, and we are obligated under our charter to pass our budget by the end of this month. And so you can come back next week and the week after that and make sure that we put some money behind this and that we're able to find somewhere in our budget where we're able to make this commitment a reality and a solid piece of it. So excited for this first step, but looking forward to what's ahead.
Councilman Fusco?
Just real quick, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Those that we've met with for some time, we appreciate your patience. It's actually months, we'll just say it. It's been a couple months that we've been meeting, talking, committing. I believe all of council is committed to seeing this through. However, though, as Council Representative Malik had mentioned, that now we've got to take out our knives and look at the budget and see what we can do in terms of ensuring that this goes forward. And I do want to thank also Nancy Holland for all of her very hard work on this. She's really led this effort and done a nice job. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Again, I want to commend all those that have been working on this. Thank you. I do want to just make this point so that we keep this. This is something we've been struggling with, having metrics that we use to make sure that we distribute whatever we do equitably. And the point I want to make is, I think the median income for a family in the city of Akron is right around $40-something thousand. I heard you say 101, 111 or below. So when we do something like this, like I stated earlier, we have folks that have worked for the city of Akron that have not had the opportunity to participate in our health care plan. We've kept them as seasonals. They wanted to work full-time, but they've never gotten that opportunity. Not just blocked out of health care, blocked out of a pension plan. So I hope whatever we put in place, they get first priority. We make them first priority because they've served the citizens by working through the city. And then just put in the metrics so that when we do serve folks, that we serve those who are most in need. And I want to say this, and I know because we have a lot of folks that we call working poor. And working poor can be at $150,000 if your bills come to $150,001. So I don't want to exclude anyone, but we have to understand this whole discussion about equity came for those that are most disproportionately impacted in every kind of way. So we cannot look at, it's not just for ARPA dollars. We've said with that whole Elevate Akron that everything we do is going to be based on an equitable platform. And to do that, we have to set the metrics so we know what equity is. I'll just say this since we have medical folks here. No one can say, give someone a shot, and one person's using a liter and another person's using an ounce. You have to understand, you have to have a common understanding. Same with us when it comes to legislation. We can't say that we're going to implement something equitably, and I'm thinking of a liter, you're thinking of an ounce, and somebody else is thinking of I ran out of my understanding of the metrics in the, you get where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Holland.
Thank you so much, Madam President, and thank you, Councilman. Really good points. And one of the things that really stands out here, and I neglected to mention it in my hasty effort to give you all the details, is this. I want to give you the example of Toledo, Ohio. Toledo City Council was able to pull together $800,000 out of the city operating budget. Now, they wanted to put more toward this, but city budgets are city budgets, and not just here, but everywhere, and particularly in northern Ohio, there are many things that we need to take care of. So what did Toledo do? Toledo teamed up with Lucas County. Now, what was finally pulled together for the purpose of this medical debt retirement program was $1.6 million. County, city. So here's what happened next. This is the exciting part of this. $1.6 million can be leveraged to extinguish $200 million in medical debt. Now, the simple formula is for every $1 that is expended in one of these programs, roughly $100 to $115 is retired in medical debt. However, you can quickly do the math and see that Toledo and Lucas County actually leveraged that much more power, okay? So what I want to say is this, absolutely heard. I think that what we have to be careful of in everything we do, not just now, but every day on into the future forever, is to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. One of the most beautiful things about this program is the mileage, my dad would have called it the bang for the buck that we get out of this. How many people and how much hurt we can cover for $1, okay? And here's the thing, that's a family of four for $111,000 and below. That qualifies. What I love about this program is that we are not tied to sometimes kind of arbitrary geographical lines, right? We are looking at pure income levels, and this has been tested under the Treasury regulations and by no less than the very consulting firm that the city of Akron is using for its ARPA spending, Guidehouse. So I say all this to say, I think this is a good one, and I also really appreciated what you had to say about City of Akron employees. I find that over and over again, it is often the people who work the hardest, who give and give and give, and serve exhaustively, tirelessly, who don't get the help. And I think that we can start right here at home. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So currently we have a motion on the floor for council as a whole. Can we get a second? Second. All in favor, roll call.
Baylor. Aye. Freeman. Aye. Fusco. Aye. Holland.
Aye.
Kamer. Aye. Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
This resolution passes 12-0. Item number 2, offered by Fusco, ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to negotiate, enter into, execute, and deliver agreements and/or other documents in connection with the sale and development of 4 vacant residential parcels located on Cross Street, consisting of approximately .24 acres of city-owned land located between Kling and Brown Streets and existing as Summit County parcel numbers 67-16955, 67-16958, 67-16961, and 68-53328, authorizing the sale of said property to Braymore Development LLC, determining said property is not needed for public use, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Consent agenda.
This item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 3, offered by Mayor Horrigan, Councilwoman Amobian, and Councilwoman Holland. Resolution urging the federal government to require the installation and use of temperature detectors along railway tracks and to provide for periodic inspection and maintenance of railroads in order to prevent future train derailments, expressing support for the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act of 2023, expressing condolences to those impacted by recent train derailments and incidents throughout the state of Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Kamer,
Thank you, Madam President. Committee's report is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules.
are there any objections to suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Thank you, President Somerville. I would like to yield to the two sponsors if they have any words they would like to add. Thank you.
Councilwoman Amobian?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamer. Just want to state for the record that when the incident happened in East Palestine, I sent a text to our Congresswoman, and she texted us a press release last week. It's 4 pages, and I would like to do 2 things. For our clerk to send this to every council member, and also if we could put it on the website in a prominent place so the citizens can see it, because there are a number of things here that I think she would want the citizens to see. I can only tell you that she has been working extremely hard with the bipartisan Ohio delegation on doing things that hopefully will prevent this from happening ever again in any parts of Ohio or any other part of the parts of the country. In addition to going to the site a couple of times and meeting with federal leaders and talking with the President of the United States, the Secretary over Transportation and Infrastructure, she is the only Ohioan at this time on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and she and the congressman from this area, I think his name is Bill Johnson, they have co-sponsored some legislation and also have asked in the sponsorship of the legislation that whatever funds are made available to those citizens on cleaning up all of the contamination and the water, the soil, moving out of their homes and the different expenses that they would incur, that whatever they get from the federal government will be tax exempt, as well as for them to stay there for a long time to make sure this is cleaned up very well. There are a number of departments that she has been meeting with, and they've been meeting together. This has been a state, federal congregation of folks coming together to remediate this issue. And hopefully, after the rail company has gone through this, I think they will be taking caution on how they transport contaminants across the United States of America. So I just want everyone to be aware of this, and I thank the Congresswoman Emilia Seitz for sending us this information, making us aware of what she's doing, and asking us to get in touch with her if we have any more questions. She's also asking us if we want to have input into community project funding at the federal level. If you would send an email to her website, if you go to her website, it tells you clearly that information needs to be there by the 17th of March, which is this Friday, by 5 p.m. And she's asking for our input. But again, I think she's worked hard on trying to make sure this doesn't happen again in any other neighborhood. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other comments at this time? Councilman Holland?
Thank you, Madam President. I am pleased to join the mayor and Councilwoman Amobian in sponsoring this resolution. I would add that this is an important moment, too, at the Senate level, in that both of our senators from the state of Ohio are primary sponsors of the Federal Railway Safety Act. This is highly significant. We're talking about Senator Brown and Senator Vance joining together, because this moment and this matter is that serious. So on February 3rd, a railroad train almost 2 miles in length derailed and created one of the worst environmental disasters that we've seen in a great long time. Thereafter, I received countless phone calls and emails, I imagine many of my colleagues did too, expressing concern about something that we all know, and that is that Norfolk Southern also travels through the city of Akron. Now, This is not a problem that we can just look away from or assume is a once-in-a-lifetime lightning strike. In fact, the story tells itself. Since February 3rd, there have been a number of additional Norfolk Southern incidents, and so the concern is not only real, but I think is and should be mounting. The Railway Safety Act will not only provide the missing temperature increase detectors that are suggested to have been a part of why this disaster happened, but it will do more. It will create greater answerability in terms of cities and states understanding what toxic loads are coming through their jurisdictions, and maybe most importantly of all, there will be meaningful penalties for violation of these increased safety regulations, meaningful penalties, something that I think we should all pay attention to. Because when we're talking about a Class 1 railroad that makes so much money, to have even a $25,000 fine, a $50,000 fine, this is a drop in the bucket. But the Railway Safety Act will make the fines meaningful enough that we can expect quick, significant, necessary improvement to safety. I'd like to join Councilwoman Amobian in thanking Congresswoman Sykes. She is super caring and engaged and responsive to our area. Also express my appreciation to Senators Brown and Vance for taking quick action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. All in favor, roll call.
Baylor. Aye. Freeman. Aye. Fusco. Holland.
Aye.
Kamer. Aye. Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
This resolution passes 12-0.
That concludes our new legislation for this evening. We're now going to move to the portion of our meeting that we refer to as our public comment period. At this time, if you are wishing to participate, I'm going to ask that you please stand so that you may be sworn in by a member of our law department or by our clerk. Thank you.
Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth? If so, please say I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just going to ask when you hear your name, please approach the podium. You will have 3 minutes to speak to this body. James Moore.
Is this on? Okay. All right, good evening, members of the City Council and the people of Akron. My name is James. I'm a medical student at Northeast Ohio Medical University, and I complete much of my clinical training here in the city. I currently serve as a VP of Political Advocacy for our local chapter of Students for a National Health Program. And I'm here, as are many of my colleagues, to support the medical debt relief resolution discussed here. Despite exams coming up and very hectic schedules, all of these individuals have taken the time to come here tonight to make their voices heard on a project that we believe is a critical step forward in righting some of the wrongs of our healthcare system. And that's a system that burdens our patients with debt that they cannot afford, and that is often totally beyond their control, simply for seeking the medical treatment that they need. A few of us may be familiar faces in this room because we've been coming to council for some time now. And I think we would be remiss not to acknowledge the ongoing struggles of Akron's Black community during these times, and the demands in this current moment to correct some of the historical injustices faced by Black Americans, and not just in Akron, but in every city in our nation. As a member of the medical profession, I feel it's my duty to speak up and speak to the fact that our field has contributed to some of the discrimination and inequity faced by minorities in America. And frankly, we have not done enough to correct course. Here in Summit County, as Councilwoman Holland kind of alluded to, around 12% of white families have medical debt. not just in general, but actually actively in collections. Among black families, that number rises to 22%, almost double, and almost a quarter of the community, again, not just with debt, but with debt actively in collections, damaging their credit, and deterring them from taking their children and their loved ones to the doctor. The city of Akron now has in front of it a unique opportunity. Having been given $145 million by Congress in the wake of COVID, with less than 1% of that amount, we could wipe out $100 million, possibly more, for some of our local citizens who are struggling the hardest. And while this initiative cannot solve the problems that have been brought to the forefront in recent weeks, I sincerely hope that it can serve as a way forward and a way for the city council and the mayor's office to come together and, if I could just briefly wrap up real quick, just a way to come together and show that you can and will do something good for the people of the city. And I'd just like to thank all of the members of the council tonight for taking the first step in making this a reality. And I hope that the importance of what's been done here tonight will really come out in some of the testimony that will follow. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Max Brockwell.
Hello, everybody. I'm Max Brockwell. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I'm a second-year medical student at Neomed. Just want to start off with some housekeeping. All the people in white coats today are speaking on behalf of themselves. They don't represent the opinions of the medical schools or the hospitals at which they're enrolled or employed. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit of the logistics about this medical debt relief program. But first, I want to start with a story. Doctors are healers, but that goes beyond solely looking at labs, scans, prescribing medications. We really need to look at the holistic picture in order to help people with their health. Prior to medical school, I worked in a skin cancer clinic that mostly saw patients with advanced disease. I recall a patient that was unfortunately diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer. If you've not seen a situation like this, it is hard to put into words. I mean, it's raw and it's life-altering. No one should have to go through that. And it's more than anyone really should have to process. But in the face of this serious diagnosis, what really troubled me was this patient's response was not to ask our team how long they had, what are the treatment options, what are the side effects, what are the prognosis. His response was sobering. How am I going to afford to pay for this without my family going into bankruptcy? It's heartbreaking. Financial stress plays a huge role in the health of our patients, and RIP medical debt, or medical debt agencies that are similar to that, are taking steps to make a positive impact right now to help these patients. And the city of Akron is in a position they can do that as well. We went over a few of the statistics today, but I really just want to emphasize that this organization is able to clear $100 of medical debt for every dollar provided. If that's not a good return on investment, frankly, I don't know what is. And this is going to be distributed equitably. We've talked about the criteria that this would be allocated to people with 4 times or less than 4 times the federal poverty threshold. And we talked a lot about what that is for a family of 4, but I'd like to point out for a family of 3, that is still $92,000. So it is still a very substantial impact, and we want to acknowledge this is going to have very broad effects, not just on the most at-risk communities, but also in the middle class. So we want to emphasize that it's covering a lot of those areas. Not only that, but RIP medical debt takes away any negative credit marks that were made on a person's report when they abolish this debt. That means that people can move forward with their lives. They can start a business, buy a home, apply for jobs that require credit reports. This is a huge impact, and I just want to say, when I entered medical school, I took an oath. The patient is why I'm here. I'll put my patients first. Tonight, I ask you as members of the Akron government to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. Brandon?
All right. Good evening, Council. My name is Brandon Petrovich, and I'm also a medical student at Northeast Ohio Medical University. I come here this evening to tell you my own story and the story of others that I've borne witness to. You see, the topic of diabetes has been that's formed this through line throughout my entire life. My best friend was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 12 years old, then I was diagnosed at 16 years old, and my older brother was diagnosed at 30 years old. Before attending medical school, I worked as a dietitian in a hospital, and I also worked at a camp for diabetic kids for 7 years. So this has been a huge component of my life and makes me who I am as a person, and has also exposed me to a lot that patients have experienced. I remember one young man I saw in the hospital with type 1 diabetes, whose story echoes that of way too many. He came into our ICU in diabetic ketoacidosis for the second time in the past couple months. I had not had the opportunity to see him the first time he came in, but the second time our paths aligned. In an hour-long conversation that I spent with him, we talked much less about his diabetes, about his health, than we did about his life in his home and the stressors that he faced. Specifically, he faced stress from medical debt, as well as other things too, and injustices that he faced throughout his life. I sat there as he cried and provided what advice I could, but there's little that could be done, unfortunately, on my part. We finally got to the reason why he was admitted to the hospital, and unsurprisingly, he couldn't afford his insulin. An all too common problem in this country, and it's an issue that affects at least 1 in 6 Americans that are taking insulin, who have to ration their insulin because they have to try to make it last as long as they can. But again, I provided what advice I could and hoped that this would be enough to at least keep him out of the hospital. And ultimately, we had a meaningful conversation, and the diabetes educator and social worker saw him, and he was discharged home the next day. I felt okay about this conversation and thought maybe I'd provide him, just enough information to keep him out of the hospital. But unfortunately, 2 months later, I saw an all too familiar name as I'm scrolling through our census for the hospital. He was admitted again for the 3rd time due to not being able to afford his insulin, and certainly not being able to pay on the thousands that he owed in medical bills after those hospitalizations. I've seen this story play out in dozens of lives, and I know it's affected children and staff that have been at the diabetes camp I work at too. And again, my own brother also has diabetes, but unlike myself, my brother doesn't have a stable job. He's gone from job to job over the past few years working as a truck driver, and he's told me himself that he's had to ration insulin on his own because he's also struggled with medical costs. And I've had to be concerned that, this story, that of the patient that's readmitted to the hospital again and again because they can't afford their insulin, and let alone medical bills, is going to become him. So ultimately, I want to call you guys, and I really want to thank you guys for passing for voting in support of this effort today to provide this funding to support relief of medical debt. And also, I really want to see you guys work together strongly to make sure this actually happens. Like we said, we need to continue to work with the mayor's office, and you guys need to work together to make sure that we have sufficient funding provided for the citizens of Akron. Thank you.
Brandon, thank you so much. Joseph?
Good evening, Madam President, council members, members of the Akron community. I'm Dr. Joseph Zarconi, tenured professor of internal medicine at Neomed, recently retired nephrologist or kidney doctor, having practiced nephrology in this city for 3.5 decades. In my practice, patients discovered to be in the earlier stages of kidney disease were referred to my care, and then I had the privilege of following up with them on a regular basis, getting to know them and their families, helping them work towards stabilizing their kidney conditions. Because of advances in treatment and prevention methods, if those patients followed up regularly and worked with me to get their high blood pressure, their diabetes, their cholesterol levels under good control, we had a good chance of keeping them from progressing for the need for dialysis treatments or a kidney transplant, or at least delaying these concerns for many years or even decades. For patients who experience medical debt or who face financial disaster if they incur the cost of the medical care they need, this kind of ongoing care and health maintenance may not be available. In the 2022 Commonwealth Health Insurance Biennial Report, 46% of people surveyed delayed or did not receive care they needed due to cost. These people have medical problems but can't visit the doctor. They skip recommended treatments or tests. They miss their follow-up appointments. They don't get needed specialist care. They can't fill their prescriptions. And in data from the 2022 Health System Tracker by Peterson Kaiser Family Foundation, 64% of adults report that in the past 12 months, they or somebody in their household had put off getting health care they needed because of their health care debt. One 36-year-old woman in that study, a couple grand in medical debt, was quoted as saying, "I feel like I have no right to step into the hospital since I am unable to pay." No right. If that woman was my patient with a kidney condition she couldn't afford to follow up with me on, she will likely eventually show up in one of our emergency rooms with catastrophic kidney failure, with life-threatening accumulation of the toxins in her blood that her kidneys are no longer filtering out for her, suffocating because her lungs are filling up with fluid. She might die before she leaves the hospital, even if we treat her as aggressively as we can. If she lives through this initial calamity, she's likely now committed to dialysis for the rest of her life, perhaps referred for kidney transplantation, but now her life expectancy, because of late-stage kidney disease and dialysis, is shorter by many years. And but for her medical debt, none of this would have had to happen. I know these heartbreaking scenarios all too well, and I've seen them unfold too often for people who come to think they have no right to pursue the care they need because they owe too much. Patients like this suffer more and die too soon because of it. I thank this council for the support of this resolution and urge you all to work with the mayor to allocate sufficient funds to enact the medical debt project for the citizens of Akron.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zarkani. Sterling Schreiber.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sterling Schreiber. I live in Ward 10. I'm here tonight to speak strongly in favor of the medical debt relief resolution and to encourage the mayor and his administration to include this in the next year's operating budget. I'm here tonight speaking as a physician, as someone who's about to graduate from internal medicine residency this summer. I'm here as someone who has seen a lot of friends and family struggle with often crippling medical debt, and someone who, over the past several years, has known many of my own patients who have struggled with this issue. And if you ask me, I think that the rising cost of healthcare and people's inability to pay and these crippling debts that come to saddle them over periods of years and decades, this is one of the biggest things that's getting in the way of millions of people having the quality of health and the quality of life that they really deserve. From talking to so many people who've been afflicted by this, once you get in medical debt, once the debt starts building up, it becomes like a weight that hangs over you. And it's to the point where people no longer feel comfortable seeking medical care, or they feel like they can't, or they feel a sense of shame that they've been run into debt. 4 in 10 Americans are struggling with some kind of medical debt, and medical debt has been cited as a primary factor in over 2/3 of personal bankruptcies. It is my opinion that in the United States of America, we should not be at the point where people can't get basic health care because they're worried about going into bankruptcy. I recognize that this is a really complex web of issues, and it's not something that's unique to this community, and to be quite honest, it's probably not something that local government alone is going to solve. But I think what's really extraordinary right now is that we have the opportunity to spend a relatively small amount of money and translate that into a world of difference for a lot of people. The prospect of spending $1 million or less and helping several tens of thousands of people right here in this city get out from under close to $100 million of debt, I think that's really extraordinary. I think that local government has the obligation to do what they can, where they can. I think it's a moral obligation, and that's why myself and everyone, all of these students are here tonight speaking to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterling. Brooks McKinley.
Hello, Council. I'm Brooks McKinley, a current first-year medical student at Neomed and a 2022 graduate of the University of Akron and current resident of Ward 5. I've been living in Akron for almost 5 years now, and it's become my home. I still receive education in Akron from doctors that work here, as well as volunteered at hospitals of the city and look for internships still here. I'm coming before the City Council today because the issue of medical debt is not only an issue for the citizens of Akron, but a personal one. Last year, my mother underwent a bilateral mastectomy and chemotherapy for treatment for her breast cancer. Even with health insurance, the out-of-pocket costs of this treatment are still a burden on my mom's budgeting just to get care that she needed. A 2019 survey from the Mesothelioma Center found that 63% of cancer patients and their loved ones reported financial struggles following just a cancer diagnosis, just the diagnosis. And 6 out of 10 adults with a healthcare debt said that their household has had to cut back on spending on basic necessities to pay down their debt, with half of these individuals using up their entire savings to do so. It's difficult to make this level of sacrifice just to pay this burden of debt. Therefore, with the pressure that the medical debt applies to families just like yours and mine, I thank the council for voting in support of this resolution and implore the mayor to allocate the funding to this project for the benefit of my fellow citizens of Akron. I will give the rest of my time.
Brooks, thank you so much. Dominic?
Good evening to the council members and the Akron community. My name is Dominic Congini. I was born and raised in Akron, and I'm currently a second-year medical student. I'm here tonight speaking in favor of the Debt Relief Project. First off, I want to say thank you to the council for voting in support of the resolution. But I would like to urge the council to work with the mayor's administration to put this in the budget for this year. I think that just about every person who pursues a career in medicine will tell you that they're doing so because they want to heal people. Yet in my currently limited clinical experience, I could not count how many times that I've seen physicians have to abandon or alter treatment plans because the patients could not afford the best options. Many of the best treatments for multiple sclerosis, diabetes, and numerous other conditions are extremely costly even when the individual has health insurance. And as a future physician, it's concerning that often the biggest barrier to helping patients get better will be their financial situation. For those patients who do not receive the best, or excuse me, for those patients who do choose to receive the best care possible for themselves, their spouse, or their child, even when they do not know how they'll be able to pay for it, other problems arise. Forgiving this debt for Akron residents could have a profound impact on their mental health. Medical debt has been shown to be a social detriment of health, and those with medical debt are 3 times more likely to develop a mental health diagnosis. Additionally, according to the World Health Organization, the prevalence of anxiety and depression has increased 25% since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given these 2 statistics, I think that using this money that was allocated in response to the pandemic for medical debt relief for Akron residents will pay dividends. I hope that you all consider the immense impact that every dollar of these funds used to forgive medical debt will have for the Akron community. Thank you for your time.
Dominic, thank you so much. Michelle?
Good evening. My name is Michelle Hillo, and I'm currently also a second-year medical student at NeoMed. Although I've encountered plenty of patients who have experienced medical debt, I'm here to talk about a more personal experience, one that almost drained my own family's savings. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, while the chances of falling into medical debt are greater for people who are insured, most people who experience difficulty paying bills do have insurance. I always thought we had good insurance in my family. We're all relatively healthy with minor chronic diseases. My sophomore year of college, I was crossing the street when I got involved in a hit and run. I was hit by a pickup truck. We reached our deductible pretty fast when I had to get transported to the ER and get a full body workout and the scan and the whole ordeal. What I didn't anticipate was having to go to an out-of-network physical therapist. I lived in the college dorms with no car, no ability to drive, and no feasible plan to attend an in-network physical therapist. My insurance covered the first 6 sessions out of the 37 sessions I had to attend, not that I was counting, to be able to walk again. I felt so bad having to drop off a $150 bill at the beginning of every session, knowing it's draining my single mom's savings account. When I say the bills hit like a truck, I truly meant it, because we got 2 surprise bills from the hospitals that we had to dispute while continuing to pay for physical therapy. I was living in constant fear of my family's gonna go into medical debt, or that something out of nowhere is gonna happen before the end of the year. The physical, mental, and emotional toll this experience took on my family is why I'm here today. I was fortunate enough to have insurance to cover some of the cost, and fortunate enough that my mom had an emergency fund account, but some people are not. So I'm here today because no 20-year-old should have to pick between choosing to walk again or going into crippling debt. So I appreciate your willingness to hear our concerns about this issue and urge you to take immediate action rather than delaying this crucial decision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'm so sorry, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, so please forgive me. Celia?
That was like that.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Salaha Shamsi, and like many of my peers, I'm an M1 at NeoMed. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight speaking in favor of this medical debt relief. I'd like to begin with the story that really started it all for me. One of the biggest reasons that becoming a physician advocate is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I grew up exposed to a multitude of perspectives from a broad spectrum of people, exposed to a variety of ethnicities, religious preferences, and political beliefs. Yet, for all the worldly education that my community was able to provide me, I didn't fully grasp the disparity in socioeconomic classes until I began teaching a group of refugee siblings as a volunteer and a kindergarten teacher. As a reward for a well-taken test, we often took my students out to the playground, an ancient structure with missing bars, rusting screws. My peers and I had never really worried about the jagged edges. Each tumble we took was rewarded with a lollipop or just a Band-Aid. There was never any worry about the injuries that we could sustain, and visiting the hospital for broken limbs would never burden our families financially. We got to be children, careless, reckless, joyful. The first time I took my students to the playground, their mothers were rightfully distressed. See, my students had fled a civil war. They hadn't seen a primary care physician in at least 3 years, and they didn't have the financial means to do so just yet in the U.S. Without the financial capability to afford a hospital visit or preemptively provide tetanus shots for their children, these mothers were rightfully concerned. That concern burdened the parents undoubtedly, but it burdened my students too, who were far more conscious of the risks they took than any 5 or 6-year-olds I had met to date. While I wish this story's unique, treatable and preventable diseases are far more likely to occur when financial barriers are in place. When it comes down to it, nobody really wants to go to a hospital or to see a doctor unless they really, really have to. Having to pay a bill at the end of what is most often an emotionally burdensome time is frankly rather cruel and yet an inevitable aspect of what are you going to do when it's weighed against your health. Currently, medical debt is prevalent with 4 in 10 adults affected. This number surges when considering the effects on people of color and women. In fact, medical debt is 50% more prevalent in Black communities and 35% more in Hispanic communities. If financial barriers could be broken, access to health care would be broadened and would diminish discrimination against any person. While undoubtedly an adjustment in healthcare policy is most definitely required to implement a nationwide change, I believe that here in Akron, you can make a tangible difference for your community. I think that by following up on this vote and getting the Medical Debt Relief Project on the budget for this year, you could be doing a great amount of moral good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sorry, I'm going to mess up again. I do apologize. Angel?
Hello. Okay. Good evening, council members, colleagues, and the Akron community. My name is Anjali Agarwal, proudly born and raised in Summit County, and now I am a second-year medical student at the Northeast Ohio Medical University. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight, speaking about the importance of medical debt relief for the residents of Akron and why this issue cannot be delayed. One of the reasons why I chose to pursue a career in medicine was so that I can be an advocate for my patients. And in doing so, I'd like to use my time here today to lift up the voices of other people. I'd like to share a story from the RIP Medical Debt website on a single mother's experience on undergoing medical debt. Here is a paraphrased quote from Michelle from Maryland. Quote, "I am a single mother of 2 children. I am on assistance for health care through our state. I would not be able to take care of myself or my boys medically without the assistance. However, if we were out of state visiting family and my son had to go to the emergency room, I had no idea that our insurance would not work because we were not in state. They accepted my insurance and everything seemed fine until I got a bill for $2,000. This was a huge burden for me. I have no way to pay for that," end quote. This story reminded me that while no one plans for a medical emergency, it is a fact of life that we all at some point will face a health concern and will need medical attention. From my own clinical experiences in the Akron Children's ER, I know that parents will often ignore their own health problems for the sake of their children. Just this past winter, I had a father tell me that both himself and his daughter were sick with a respiratory infection. He couldn't afford to get treated himself, however, he still brought his child to the ER to get the medications that she needed to recover. So I ask you, how does a parent tell their child that they can't afford to see the doctor? The short answer is, you don't. You pay the $2,000 trip to the emergency room, even if it means total financial ruin. This is because this is your child that we are talking about, your most precious asset. You will do whatever it is you can, even if it means putting your own needs aside. Medical debt affects people of all ages and walks of life, and so on behalf of my future patients, I would ask you to allocate the necessary funds to clear as much medical debt as possible and as soon as possible. This will provide immense financial and emotional relief for the residents of Akron struggling with debt on account of doing what is necessary to live a healthy life. We here have the power to make this happen. And as Michelle from Maryland will tell you, quote, medical debt can literally ruin a family's life, and the gracious help that RIP medical debt provided changed mine, end quote. And for these reasons and many more, I urge the City Council of Akron to work with the Mayor's office and include the funds in this year's budget to clear up medical debt. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Sam?
Hi, good evening, Council and the Akron community. My name is Sam Accordino, and I'm a first-year medical student at Northeast Ohio Medical University, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity today to speak in front of you all regarding the medical debt relief project here in Akron. In my experiences with residents in the Akron community, specifically at Akron Children's, it is all too often that I've witnessed and spoken with parents who choose to seek health care for their children, while in the process neglecting their own health to avoid accruing additional medical care and debt. I remember one time when a single mother walked into the ER with her 3 children, seeking care for one child's injury. After speaking with her shortly after her arrival, she described to me that she knows that it may seem that she does not care to be seen by a doctor herself, but truthfully, her reasoning lies with the fact that she values the health and well-being of her own children over her own health care and could not afford the medical bills that would come with both. A battle that many parents must face when it comes to the care of their children without the money to cover it. Not only is this the issue of medical debt and sacrificing your own health to avoid accumulating more, something I've witnessed in the medical setting as a student, but it is also much more personal than that. When I was young, my grandmother was diagnosed with a psychiatric condition associated with a very costly monthly medication, which she could no longer afford because she was unemployed and lost her insurance upon divorcing her abusive husband. As a result, my grandmother decided that she would not pay for her medications to ensure that she could still live independently and take care of her necessities. However, this unfortunately only led to a worsening progression of her condition, multiple hospital stays, and rehabilitation services that accrued several pricey medical bills, the exact thing that she was hoping to avoid by not spending the money on her medications from time to time. This cycle continued for several years of my grandmother's life and resulted in a large sum of expenses and debt, which would not have been alleviated in her lifetime if her widow status had not been approved. No matter, this fear of circulating debt and rationing money for her care only accelerated the difficulties of her illness, and if a program such as the medical debt relief program that you are here working towards now had existed then, she may have been a part of my life for a much longer period of time. That being said, my grandmother, like the mother I met in the ER at Akron, both felt that they had other bills and priorities to pay over themselves. And at the end, this is a cycle that will continue to perpetuate. For these reasons, I hope that the City of Akron continues to work with the mayor and the proposed funds that they have set aside to help in the clearance of medical debt for the betterment of the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sam. Colin Fricker?
Good evening, Akron City Council. My name is Colin Fricker. I'm an M2 at NeoMed, and I was born in Akron. Most of the time, people would do just about anything not to spend time in a hospital. An attending once told me, and it's stuck with me for a long time, that there are only 2 reasons why someone goes to seek medical care. 1, they're scared, or 2, they're hurting. Many people were scared and many people were hurting during the COVID-19 pandemic during the summer of 2020 and beyond. I know this because, like Dominic said, I was one of the people who became more anxious as the pandemic went on. This is because I knew many people who are fighting for their lives in hospitals across the state. And it was the job of medical professionals to save those lives at whatever cost necessary. However, the personal financial cost, in many instances, was great. One story that exemplifies this is the story of Miss Rebecca Gale. An Ohio resident, Miss Gale retired months before the pandemic to spend more time with her husband. But in the first few months of the pandemic, Mr. Gale passed away due to the disease after a prolonged battle in which he was life-flighted to another hospital, underwent multiple life-saving measures, and eventually expired. All that remained for Miss Gale was grief, a funeral, and a $40,000 medical bill that she had no way to pay after insurance covered a great deal of it already. Miss Gale and people like her did not have the option to take on medical debt. It was simply forced upon them at that time. It's my understanding that the federal government allotted much of the ARPA funding to be used for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Swift action from the City Council in allocating some of these funds to this resolution would greatly help the area to recover so we can continue to put that period behind us. Councilwoman Holland mentioned earlier that this resolution can be life-changing. Can be. Until there's a dollar amount behind that can be, we really do not have anything to work off of. Thank you again for taking those first steps tonight, voting to pass the resolution. But in order to relieve some of the fear and hurt in the community, we need to take this a step further. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Dean?
Good evening, colleagues, council members, and Akron residents. My name is Dean Snelson, and I have lived in this city for the last year and a half while pursuing a degree in medicine from Northeast Ohio Medical University. As an aspiring physician dedicated to serving others, I am honored to be able to present this cause in front of you all today. In the past, and through thousands of hours of volunteering in the Cleveland community, I have seen firsthand what action can do to affect the lives of community members who are burdened financially and medically. Just this past month, while working under a primary care provider out of Austintown, Ohio, a patient came into the office stressed by the fact each visit costed them hundreds of dollars, none of which was covered by insurance. This patient had a chronic condition, requiring numerous visits per year, all of which would incur a similar fee. Frustrated, the patient chose paying this price in order to keep seeing the physician rather than be transferred to another doctor. This problem is entirely too common. Community members, maybe even loved ones, are having to choose between taking on unnecessary financial burden with increased risk of medical debt and choosing their preferred medical provider. This single barrier along a road of hundreds has led to disabling out-of-pocket medical costs, and although our patient decided to risk it for now, many simply cannot, or are too far in debt to do so. The result of that is many patients having to choose providers they are not familiar with to handle intimate medical conversations and procedures. Should we really ask our community members to see their healthcare experience short because of their financial situation? Better yet, should we ask all these patients to risk impending medical debt with the potential to forever encroach upon their everyday life moving forward just so they can get a checkup from a healthcare provider they trust? These type of scenarios are offered every day to our patients, and I've seen how much hopelessness they create. We have an opportunity to give back hope to these people. Action is vital, especially when the power to help others is available. It just needs a catalyst to create momentum. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dean. Michael West.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to all of our stories tonight. My name is Michael West. I'm a second-year medical student at Neomed. I'm a lifelong Ohioan, and me and my partner have lived in Akron Ward 3 for the past 2 years as I've been going to school here. When I decided to become a doctor, I made a promise to myself. I promised that wherever I ended up, I would not simply serve that community as an outsider. I wanted to be a part of that community, a full member. In the time that I've lived here, I've celebrated with this community, and I have hurt with this community. And along with my fellow colleagues and mentors here tonight, I'm here to continue fulfilling that promise and to ask you for some help in remedying some of that hurt. As Councilwoman Holland mentioned earlier tonight, people in the United States owe at least $195 billion in medical debt. This debt is caused by our broken health insurance industry, an industry that claims to exist to help people, but is the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. Even those who are not facing medical debt at this moment fear it. Allow me to paraphrase a fellow Ohioan quoted by the Kaiser Family Foundation about how debt affects her medical care. She says, "There's a permanent anxiety with calling a doctor's office and scheduling a visit because I never know beforehand how much it will cost. Then, out of the blue, I get slammed with a bill I can't pay." How can we, as doctors, claim to be healing people when there's so much pain in the aftermath? When care comes at such a high cost, we must ask ourselves, to what extent are we just trading one illness for another? This debt relief program that you all have voted for tonight is a treatment for that other illness, but it is not a cure. It would not be fair to say that this is just a Band-Aid. A better comparison might be a tourniquet applied to stop massive and life-threatening bleeding. To truly cure the issue of medical debt, we need significant policy reform to fix this problem upstream. But that does not change the colossal impact that this debt reform policy can produce. As we hear from people who have received this care, for this help from RIP Medical Debt, I want to share a quote from one recipient just to end. "I received my letter from you and I just fell on the floor crying. You have no idea how much I've been stressing about these bills for my injury. I cannot thank you enough for this. I can breathe a lot easier after having been laid off. This was my biggest debt." Thank you for showing your support tonight, and I hope you, going forward, you will join me in ensuring that this makes it tangibly into the hands of Akron residents. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. Michael Massey?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Massey, and I am another second-year medical student here today to speak on the urgent need for medical debt relief in the city of Akron. As you have heard, many stories have brought us here tonight, and I just wanted to share 2 patient stories from when I was a nurse's assistant. I cared for a young woman who was newly married to her husband when she had her first symptomatic attack of myasthenia gravis, which is a neuromuscular disease that causes weakness, paralysis, and inevitably death. It costs on average $15,000 a year of out-of-pocket expenses with insurance to treat the disease. On her second day in the hospital, her husband left to pawn off their wedding ring so they could begin to pay for the treatment. Another patient I cared for had a different neurodegenerative disease that bankrupted his family while they still had 2 kids in college. This story stuck with me because at the time I was an undergrad gearing up for medical school. And while I'm still taking out loans, I can always rely on my parents for my own financial security. For this family, however, one singular medical diagnosis bankrupted their family and tarnished their children's opportunity for upward social mobility. I think we can all agree that the healthcare system is broken, and these stories won't go away until there is major healthcare reform. But this opportunity we are bringing to you today can alleviate a tremendous amount of harm placed on the community right now. So I want to lay out our vision we have after passing this resolution. With this passing, the City Council has announced to the mayor, to Summit County, and local hospitals, this is something that you all want. We hope that Mayor Horgan and the council will then add funding to this project in this year's budget. For just $800,000 dedicated to this project, which is less than 1% of the city's ARPA funds, we could clear at least $80 million of medical debt in Akron. But we shouldn't stop there. As Councilwoman Holland pointed out, Akron should replicate what happened in Toledo, where they got Lucas County commissioners to match them in funding to clear medical debt for their entire county. So a collective $1.6 million donation to RIP medical debt is projected to cancel $160 to $240 million of medical debt owed by 80,000 to 100,000 residents of Lucas County. Imagine how many families we could help in Summit County if Akron takes initiative now, just like Toledo did. A poor credit score for medical debt can limit a person's ability to start a business, get a job, or secure affordable housing, which I know is something that the council prioritizes. The best part of this program, as Councilwoman Holland put out in committee, is that medical debt clearance is directly negotiated with the hospitals, and no person in Akron with medical debt needs to apply for debt forgiveness. There is no headache involved. If they qualify for debt forgiveness and the city provides enough funding to RIP medical debt, people just a few months from now could receive a letter informing them that their medical debt is forgiven with no work on their end. It is with this context and this vision going forward that I thank you for passing this resolution and now urge you to work with the administration, Mayor Horgan, and Summit County on this initiative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Emily Huff.
Good evening. My name is Emily. I'm the Vice President of Education and Development for our NeoMed chapter of Students for a National Health Program. I'm also the last of the white coats in person, so everybody can take a breath. I want to end what has been a long block of speakers, first and foremost, by thanking everybody here for their patience, their concern, and their willingness to listen. It feels almost redundant to make these arguments to such a receptive and a kind audience. And it's encouraging to find so many people in Akron with the same values and goals that we have. I'm sure you've heard pretty much all there is to say about medical debt at this point, so I just want to close this out on something that's a little more personal. I think if you asked any medical student, any medical person why they got into medicine, the knee-jerk response is to say to help people. It's such a common trope that my friend Dom actually beat me to it in his testimony. And I think if we asked all the council members here, the legislators and the activists who show up to these meetings, like, they would say the same thing. But I've personally found, and I'm sure many of you have found, that the task, the process of actually helping people can involve such arduous, fruitless, and thankless work that it's really easy to lose that passion. Medicine is prone to somewhat a jaded culture. I think a lot of doctors grow to feel like the value of their work is outweighed by the flaws and the inequalities that the medical system perpetuates. I can attest that as a student, there's nothing like trying to learn medicine, and especially being tested on medicine, to make you realize that you really don't know anything. Our training at school involves practice to develop our skills in physical exam, interviewing, medical documentation, and it's a crucial part of that training to have someone actively correct you, tell you what you're doing wrong. But on hard days, it's really, really easy to feel like you know nothing, you do nothing right, and you're still years away from being able to actually help a patient. And I really can't thank the Akron City Council enough for proving me wrong. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but trying to make things better is exhausting. So much important work and legislation and change is only achieved through slow, boring, incremental progress and traversing lots of red tape. And I'm sure everyone in here has wondered at some point, is it really worth it? And I'm really glad that for once we all get to join hands over a cause like this and say, yeah, it really is worth it. The gap between wanting good and doing good can be miles wide in medicine as well as politics. And I hope it's a rare reward for members of this council and the administration to have a policy before them that bridges that gap so simply. I can't begin to express my gratitude for the opportunity you've given me as a future doctor to be able to go into the Akron area and look my patients in the eyes and know that you've helped us to do something that's made a meaningful difference in their lives. Thank you all so much.
Emily, thank you so much. Is Nick Cassiopo here with us? Nick? No? Nick Cassiopo? Reverend John Beatty?
Madam President and members of the council, it is an honor to follow these young people. Thank you so much. God bless you, and I hope what they have said lands on good ears. Several city council meetings ago, I overheard a conversation between a young citizen and Deputy Mayor Marco Somerville. The young man asked, "What about Jalen Walker?" Deputy Mayor Marco Somerville blurted out, "That's over. I have been a hospice chaplain in my younger days. One of the truths I learned was that you cannot rush the grief process. Everyone must be free to process the loss of their loved ones as long as it takes." So why would Deputy Mayor Marco Somerville, proud owner of a successful funeral home, exclaim, "That's over"? It's not over for Jalen's mother, Pam. It's not over for Jalen's sister, Jade. It's not over for Jalen's church family, St. Ashworth Apostolic Temple. It's not over for the black community of Akron, and it's not over for many white homeowners who have signs in their front yards, like mine, that read "Black Lives Matter." It's not over for me. One of the mothers suffering from the violent loss of their sons was a neighbor in my neighborhood, where we have several fine Akron neighbors who are Akron police. She was walking her dog, I was walking ours. I asked how she was doing. She said, "Not well, because they have postponed the trial." She was speaking of the trial of the young men who killed her older son. I asked, "Why did they do that?" She said, "The city is postponing all trials because they're getting ready for riots when the notice of an indictment or lack of one for the police officers who killed Jalen comes out about the middle of April." Apparently, the city government, the city and county courts, the mayor and the Akron Police Department know it's not over either. So does Deputy Mayor Somerville. So do we. We already know that the state attorney general will say exonerated. Because police lynching of unarmed black men is legal in the state of Ohio. I believe that the Akron police will start those riots, if they happen, because the powers that be want a show of force to show the black community and their white supporters that loud protests of grief will no longer be tolerated. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Beatty. Is Vicki Armstrong here?
Good evening, Madam President and council members. I'm Vicki Zirko Armstrong. I live in Ward 1. And I have questions about the proposed sale of four city-owned properties on Cross Street to Braemore Development, LLC. That's in Planning and Development Ordinance number 2 on today's agenda that's been put off until next week. This company, Braemore Development LLC, is owned by Jack W. Morrison Jr., who is a lawyer also with Emer Cunningham. And so I have questions about this sale. Excuse me. How are the properties acquired by the city and for how much? 2, how are people apprised that city-owned parcels are up for sale? Is it only published in the paper, or are the parcels posted? 3, on what basis will the sale be negotiated? Around the price paid, if there was one, or for the taxable value of the properties, which is $12,080 total, or the total appraised value of $34,490, or something in between those figures? Does the council get to vote on accepting the negotiated sale price? Will these properties be able to get the 15-year tax abatement if they are used as rental properties? I see that Braemar Development, or possibly a subsidiary, Braemar Housing, owns a goodly number of student housing properties around the University of Akron. Is it a sound idea for just a few companies to control much of the rental properties for students in the university area? I believe that inhibits rental housing competition in that area. If any of you sitting on council or currently serving in the administration have ever taken campaign donations from Mr. Morrison or any of his family, would you please disclose that information? If you are in the administration, recuse yourself from the negotiations, or if you are on council, abstain from voting on the sale to Braemar Development. I believe it would be the ethical thing to do and serve the cause of transparency in government. I hope to get some answers to my questions before this comes up for a vote, and perhaps Mr. Fusco could answer most of them. I try very hard to be an informed citizen, and I would appreciate these answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Armstrong. And after the meeting, if you would be so kind, if you want to get with Councilman Fusco so they can get you some answers.
Okay.
I think this is, it's hard to read. Is it Trey? Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Trey. I live in Ward 1. Before I say my piece, I'd like to thank all of the people from NeoMed that are here today for voicing their support for the resolution that y'all have been working on. As a prior resident of rural Ohio, I saw firsthand a lot of the skepticism and irritation with the private healthcare industry that we have in the United States here today. And while I'd like to echo the sentiment that it is but a tourniquet, I do think that that would be beneficial to the people here in Akron. So wanted to say that first. All right, so for my piece, I'd like to start by quoting a message seen on the Akron City Council website. The council plays a very special role in the operation of your city government. All budgetary matters are authorized by the Akron City Council. In that role, the council serves as the city's oversight and accountability branch of the local government. It is our job to ensure the government is open and transparent. As we've seen, your constituents, they're angry, just a little bit. They've cited your approval of the White Pond property development, to which protest persists. They've cited your inability to push for a semblance of police reform, despite your own stated wishes to do so after the, yes, murder of Jalen Walker. They've cited most recently your attempt to approve the proposed Citizens Review Board, an initiative that was overwhelmingly voted for by the Akron voters, to which individuals on the council dragged their old white feet. My question is, how do you establish transparency? How are you exemplifying accountability? Accountability to whom, even? The FOP? Triton Property Ventures? Ayn Rand? Ronald Reagan? I want to be clear, as a newer Akron resident, I haven't lost faith with everyone on the board. However, it seems to me that whoever it is that the board is accountable for, it isn't the people they're supposed to represent. I say all of this knowing some of you on the board genuinely care, but intent generally does not matter. The bottom line is that you're failing your constituents. That's why they were here last week, crowding the hallways. Now they're asking you to submit yourself to an ethics audit by the Ohio Ethics Commission. An ethics audit. So I'll ask again, who are you accountable to? As an aside, if you are one of those angry constituents, the board and myself implore you to join your community, maybe even put some pressure on your officials. They ask you to on their website.
Trey, thank you. Harrington Hargrove.
Good evening, Council. Harrington Hargrove, 1008 Laurel Avenue, Akron, 44307, Ward 3. And I would like this council to allocate funding for our community. I've been standing before this council for 35 years asking for Ward 3. Where's why won't y'all do anything for us as a community in Ward 3? 35 years, not one new minority business. And what other community has that? 35 years, not a black business in Ward 3 that was produced by the city. Like I spoke before, you took all our businesses away with this inner belt. And what did you replace it with? Family Dollar, Dollar General, on the same property that we asked to be develop, and you told us you weren't developing in that community. That's what you told us. 35 years, we've been hearing that, not in that community. What it is, it's not for the black community. It's in our community, but it's not for the black man and woman that lives there. We've gotten nothing. Nothing. This council can't come up with not one solution for our problem, and you created it. This council, not you individually, but it's been going on for 35 years, but you're a part of it. I've heard very few of you speak up, stand up, and say anything that's going to elevate my community. Not very few. I don't call names, but you know who you are. Every one of you know your attitude toward the black community. You show it because you don't do anything. Where is the justice down here in this city when it comes to black opportunity? I would like, who's ever on the budget committee, tell me how much money have you spent in Ward 3 for the black man and woman in 30 years, in 10 years? Would somebody answer that for me? I'm waiting. I am waiting for some kind of answer, which I never get. Not just myself, my community. This council, it's a lot of racism in here. I say that because it is, yes. If you don't allocate, you do just injustice to people, that is a racist act. I know you guys don't like to hear it, but show me that where I'm not telling the truth. The Elevate Akron study said it. The GARB report said it. So are you going to tell me you disagree with them? That's hogwash.
Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. Brian Hardy?
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Gallery. Thank you, NeoMed, for being here. I come tonight to address a little bit of last week's mayhem in the beginning of Council, starting with a vote for those members to a public oversight board for the Akron City Police Department. There was discontent among Council, big time, ending with a no vote. They didn't want to move forward. They just kicked the can. The discontent went further with attacks on council members, going after their character or morals of an elected official. Now let's move on to White Pond. The council voted in June of 2022 for the sale, to the sale of White Pond properties with the changes from a 2006 urban project. What they do? They changed it to residential, and it was never residential. Trident had plans in their hands prior to that. Not a word to any constituent in the areas about what was going on. public officials knew well in advance with no concern for general public or the adjacent or where the property was being done in Ward 4, and I'm adjacent in Ward number 8. The council voted all in favor to do this, again, without talking to any constituents. They changed the plans to allow this deal to happen. Then later, the public was given notice in the summer. Big deal. A $50 million plan in Akron. Not much was said. When the final sale was voted on this year in 2023, there was a legal lawsuit. This is prime. The officials hid behind it because it's in litigation. We have no comment. Akron never had any comment to those who asked questions about the property. This is a taxpayer concern. You had a right to vote. We have a right to vote. The right to vote and a right to express our views. You have violated this right. We, the gallery, and the citizens of Akron will remember these actions. You will give us a true picture. You've given us a true picture of what the council represents in their dealings. We will use our rights and we will vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Lillian Barnes.
Good evening. I told you I was going to wear this every Monday. Once again, I speak racism and corruption. I'm going to say names again. Brad McKerrick, Jeff Fresco, Phil Labrato, Mike Freeman, Donnie Kramer, and now Ginger Baylor. Just because you're black doesn't mean that you support your own people hurting by the police brutality. Prejudice, racism, still, not by least, Clay Closer, FOP. I am so disappointed about some of this council when a black man, Imokai, was supposed to be sitting on our community Citizens Review Board. We voted for issue 10, but from day one, some of this council was disrespectful. It was not being heard by the community. Our voice did matter because issue 10 won. 50 days, May 2nd, we're approaching another election. A lot of you guys would not be sitting in them seats, which is ours. How does it feel when so many lawsuits are happening here in Akron? Did you read about Michael Harris' activist pressure that was here when Jalen Walker's protest was going on? Found out not guilty. Reminder, he was the one that was beaten by APD. If he decides to sue, that money does not come here. It goes out of state where he's at. I also support Mr. O'Neill. The Board of Ethics should come in and to investigate this council because evidently there's a lot of racism, prejudice going on into the council. We're tired, and once again, May 2nd will be approaching very fast. I understand how it feels to be discriminated against by the color of my skin, even though I'm black and white, because my skin is brown. And I also feel how it feels to be discriminated because of the religion I used to practice. Islam. They sit up there and call us terrorists all the time. I'm also discriminated because I'm a woman, a black woman, in the government's eyes. Please let's end racism now, Akron. Let's stop the police brutality and corruption that's going on in the city. We shouldn't have to say another name, justice for Jalen, Muhammad, Omar, and whom by APD. Hope you guys like the shirt.
Thank you, Lillian. We do have a few people who are online with us who would also like to participate. So just going to ask if you are online and want to participate during public comment period, turn your cameras on and unmute yourself so that you may be sworn in by our clerk.
Can you please raise your right hand?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth? If so, please say, "I do."
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And doctor, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Kwejo Yerinde. I'm a pediatrician at Access Point Community Health Centers. I've been in practice for more than 30 years, and I live in Akron, Ward 7. I speak in my personal capacity as a resident of Akron, not as a representative of any organization. And my testimony is in support of the medical debt relief resolution. Medical debts that are bought around the neck of many of the parents of the children under my care. Some miss their appointment repeatedly because their parents cannot afford transportation costs to bring them to the clinic. I recently saw an adolescent in my clinic who hopes to become a doctor someday. And I asked her to visit a public library to find books and journals of interest. But her mother rolled her eyes and said, "Maybe that will happen after I have paid off my debt and can get the car back on the road." So I urge you that every day spent under the weight of medical debt is a day of immediate adverse consequences for families. And even in the future, it's a denial of nutrition, health, education, and social experiences for children who are the future of our city and our country. So in conclusion, I would like to thank the City Council members for your unanimous vote in support of the medical debt relief resolution. And I urge the mayor to allocate funds for the proposal for the resolution without further delay. And I also would like to thank so many medical students who have been advocates of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Phyllis DeHart. Phyllis, you're on mute. Looks like we might have lost her. Do we have anyone else online wishing to participate? I think she's coming back. Phyllis, can you hear me? Phyllis, if you can hear us, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, it dropped me completely off Zoom. Good evening, Council, and those in the audience. My name is Minister Phyllis DeHart. I am pleased to be here finally. I've tried for the last 3 weeks to get downtown to the council meeting. As one way or the other, I'm going to get my voice heard, so I praise God for that. I'm on here I want to first say that the medical thing is a very good idea. That's not why I'm here. I'm here tonight to speak about conduct of council. I walked out I was there, but I wasn't there to speak, with a Caucasian woman. And what she said to me was a sentiment over the majority of the people that voted for the amendment. And I cannot understand why at this late date in the time we're still having the trouble in council. The Bible says that what is good when brothers down and talk to one another in and in peace. There is so much racism among you members of council. For the next 2 nights, I cried, I wept, I cried out to God, I prayed. What is the answer? First of all, everyone sucks. You're hiding behind your racism, you're in suits, but you're no better than members of the The one gentleman in council said that how can you, the police didn't come up with the oversight board. For me, you be well, because he said pig gonna be. Now that's not the real you that goes against them. It's because a young man who is highly intelligent, he went to high school at Firestone. It's a very good house with my grandson. We went to West Reserve. He knows what he's talking about. You're upset because he's an activist. And that's what we need. Activists aren't all bad. You sit there, you have the whole standard. But there should be a shame of himself. I wasn't one of his citizens. He spoke out right against Linda Omian. I was disgusted with that. Yet he didn't call out for white men who refuse to admit, number one, you're a racist. You refuse to admit the reason you don't want alcohol on the oversight board committee. So if you can't get it together in city council, what are we as citizens supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? I would like to come down there and pray with each and every one of you.
Phyllis, I'm so sorry, but
To
your
remind you.
Phyllis, I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes is up.
And I hope I do.
That concludes our public comments for this evening. Again, we want to thank everyone who came down and who participated. At this moment in time, we're going to go over our committee assignments. Planning, Councilman Fusco. Rules, Councilman Freeman.
2 p.m.
Public Safety, Councilman Kamer.
2:15.
Budget and Finance, Councilman Freeman.
3 p.m.
Parks and Rec, Councilman Lombardo.
1:45.
Housing and Neighborhood Assistance, Councilman Fusco. Public Service, Councilwoman Mosley.
2 p.m.
Health and Social Services, Councilwoman Amobian.
2:30.
Public Utilities and Green Committee, Councilman Freeman.
2:45.
Is there anything else coming before council at this time? Councilman Neal, you defer. Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to rise and thank the NeoMed students for all your work and your efforts on the RIP medical debt, and to my colleague, Councilwoman Nancy Holland, who has put in over 5 months of hard work pulling this together. As you already know this, RIP medical debt was established in 2014, go figure, by 2 individuals or executives who collected medical debt, go figure. And in that time, they have been able to eliminate over $8.5 billion in medical debt for over 5.5 million people. That is astonishing, but even with all those efforts, it's still not enough. So I'm encouraged and excited that we now have this resolution, hope turns into an ordinance here in the city of Akron, because it's long overdue. And as I said this afternoon, this is your system. It works for everyone. The models all say that it works, and so keep fighting, keep doing the work, because the end result is to make sure that no one has to have this medical debt. Because it's so passionate and such a love for me is because our family experienced it firsthand. My dad got sick, and even after my dad passed away, in that 18 days that he was in the hospital, the medical bills just accumulated, and then they sent my mom this outrageous bill, even after my dad passed away. So even when a family member passes away, that debt does not go away. The debt stays there. We tried to negotiate the price down with the collectors of that debt. So I hope that that there is some funding set aside for widows and widowers. It will be needed because they are still having to pay when their spouses pass away if they don't have coverage. My dad had insurance still a balance. There was still a balance. And this is just perfect for Akron. It's perfect for the United States, and I'm hoping that we can do some, hope that the county will come on board. And that maybe they can use some of their opiate funding, because a lot of this it involves some opiate and addiction and recovery within that system. So hopefully we can bring those all together and really bring some relief to the residents of Akron. Thank you. I appreciate you all.
Councilman Neal?
Thanks, Madam President. In relation to the work that you've done, I want to say, think of one, hopefully as a city, we're making sure that all of our residents that may have had folks that worked in the rubber industry, since that settlement is out, and they can get some assistance, that we help get connected, because a lot of times resources are out there, but people just don't know how to get connected. I'm hoping that we do that. Number two, I heard the one gentleman say he was taking out loans. Medical debt, the next thing, and probably some of you, is loan debt. And I thought about how this council missed an opportunity with just a resolution where we had the Scholar Graduate Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, where we put away homes that needed some gentle care, but we needed to take them. Hopefully, medical debt is so critical. Student loan debt is right up there. Also, we'll take that up. Don't see Mr. Little here, but we had some outstanding young men and women go down to the state at Columbus and wrestle, and some came back with chances. But just to make it down there was an accomplishment. I want to commend them. And then I want to thank, this area is just, as our Congresswoman said, City of Champions. So hats off to Hoban and my 10 down this weekend in the Final Four for high school basketball. Let's wish them both well. One in Division I, one in Division II. And then I want to say this, and I'm saying this because we've got to understand. And and Mr. Kamer, because you said you had the conversation, Mr. Fusco, I want to share, just earnestly, you have to understand again, we're talking about systemic practices. If you know the history of this country, law enforcement and the black community, period. But I ran off some names to you, starting with Fred Hampton. Young man was only 21 years old. Malcolm Luther King, many others who lost. And I can't, to summarize what he said, one of the most dangerous things to a black man. And here we have an elected official, not sure, making a commitment to the FOP about a man. That was what the citizens place. Who else was on that list? I don't understand, if what I'm saying doesn't resonate with you, please don't tell me you understand systemic racism. Don't tell me you understand structural and institutional. That is the very fabric of this country. And we've been told and outside of the South. If you're not even trying to understand, man, we're never going to move forward as a council. But that's what it talks about, being honest, transparent, and impartial, of sharing that information with council.
President. My colleague, Mr. Know-It-All, mentioned my name, and I never had no conversations with the FOP. I know how I voted last week, and I stated my reasons, so I think my colleague should get his facts straight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you so much, Madam President. I feel like we've talked a lot today, but I wanted to just pick up on something that two of my colleagues mentioned that I think's important for the community to know about in terms of retirement of medical debt. I am happy to report that there will be no hassle in terms of applying. There will be no paperwork. There will be no Google form, nothing to take downtown and put in a box. This is something that, assuming we're working with RIP medical debt, this is something that RIP will actually perform for us, using identification systems to find the debt, to match it up to known information already in the possession of the hospital system, always observant of people's medical privacy, their HIPAA-protected information. So there's no hassle. There's no need to fill something out. Similarly, this is not something where you have to save receipts or show receipts. You won't get direct payment. Rather, RIP medical debt will reach in and actually extinguish the debt directly. What will happen, and I want everyone to picture this beautiful moment, is that if you're one of the people who qualify for this program, one day in your mailbox, instead of a scary debt collection bill, there will be a letter that says, your debt has been extinguished. And let's just take that in for a moment. What that would be like for your mom, for your Nana, for your sister, for you. This is the life-changing thing. One more thing I want to make sure everybody understands. The debt collection statute of limitations is 6 years. And you know, when you're 21 or when you're 99, that's just how I feel at this hour of the day, 6 years is a really long time, right? When you're starting your professional life, when you're starting your family life, when you are making big decisions, 6 years is a really long time. How would you like to have to put off starting your family, or buying the house, or getting the bigger apartment because you just had a baby? Because you've got this thing hanging over your head. And on the numbers, 4 out of 10 Americans have this thing hanging over their head. We don't talk about it. There's so much shame, right, that goes with this. There's so much shame. And the stories, yes, I'm a softie, okay? But the stories about the patients that y'all have talked to who said candidly, I take my babies to the doctor, but I don't take myself. Those made me cry. We can do better. It's in our power. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And also, too, I want to just take an opportunity just to thank our medical students. Thank you. I know we have been talking. Let's give them a round of applause. We have been talking for months and months and months. You guys have been coming down before council very diligently with your cause. And I just want to thank you because, again, you all are the reason why we are having this conversation. This would not have even been on our radar 4 or 5 months ago if it had not been for all of you. So I just want to say thank you. Akron thanks you. We have a lot of work to do, but we are committed to doing all that we can to make this happen. I also want to say that, again, I want everyone to know that we are still working very diligently to fill that 9th seat on the Citizens Review Board. Again, said very candidly from the very beginning, we cannot have a Citizens Review Board unless we have a young black male, 18 to 35, sitting around that table. And so we are working very hard to identify that individual. We want that person seated so that they are able to attend, hopefully, that very first meeting. Is there anything else coming? We have a motion for adjournment. If there are no other objections, meeting adjourned.
This concludes the live broadcast of Akron City Council. Margot Somerville, President of Council, presiding.